Hi, everyone. So I'm really honored to be hosting a panel today that's all about education. And I'm just going to do a bit of setup around the kind of education system and the future of education before the panelists come up to actually share their particular projects and expertise. But I thought we'd do something a little participatory first, just to kind of get everyone in the room and kind of together. So I'd love you to pick someone that you don't know, could be next to you or anywhere in the room, and I'd love you to share a story or an experience of learning, could be at school, could be outside of school, something formative that shaped your life during an education experience. So if you could just turn to someone, introduce yourself, and share a story about learning, that would be great. And I'm just going to give you like 1 minute, so quickly. I asked them to do something. Okay, and if you've shared your story, now someone else share their story. It could be positive, could also be negative. Okay, so let's bring it to a close. Does anyone have an experience that they would like to share with the audience? Could be something positive, could be something negative, could be something about a particular teacher or particular experience. Anyone? No one? Well, oh, great.
Hello.
Hi.
Well, I remember when I was studying, I'm a teacher, and I remember that I did my Erasmus in Aveiro, in Portugal, and I remember that there the experience was really different from here. And I remember the classes that they were not like here, that I remember that I was like writing all the day in the class, seat. There was really different because there were like classes of theater, for example, singing, doing different things in the class, moving, and I remember it that it was a really good experience for me because it was really different from the things that I was doing here in Spain.
So a broader collection of learning experiences. Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Anybody else have something that they want to share? Maybe something that was harder or maybe not so positive? Oh, in the corner, in the white shirt.
Awesome, thanks. So it may not have been super hard, but I had this experience. I went to the Solomon Islands at some point in my life to help my friend shoot a documentary about rising sea levels. And before that experience, I did not know that much about climate change, the science behind it all. But once I got there, we got stuck on the island for 2 months, and all I had was Kindle with just books on climate change. And being on the island, I was about to be submerged by the ocean. That was the most formative experience, learning experience. It definitely changed me and what I've been doing.
Beautiful.
I changed my careers because of that.
Beautiful.
Being there, physically seeing people and learning about what's happening there, it cannot compare to any university, any school class or whatever.
Beautiful. There's a school I'll talk about in a second, and they call that place-based learning. Learning in a place, about the place, letting the place transform the way you feel about it. So the point of kind of doing this exercise was really just to show that the experiences that we have in learning are really formative to the choices we make and also the feelings we have. And I think my career has really kind of followed a path of a lot of learning experiences. Most of them have been learning by doing, hands-on learning, play-led learning experiences. And we have an amazing panel today that is going to really talk about hands-on learning, which is going to be incredibly exciting. And for me, my earliest learning experiences came from a kind of learning methodology called Montessori. Who has heard of Montessori in the room? Wonderful. So I don't have to tell you about the system. I mean, this was established 114 years ago. It's a child-led approach to learning. She developed a curriculum that went from 0 to high school with lesson plans, curriculum, tools, models. I mean, she was like, Maria Montessori was the first female doctor in Italy and established this incredible methodology for learning, which is incredibly profound. And yet, our education, that we have huge megatrends that are impacting our lives that I don't need to go through, but a lot of the panels have talked about them, whether it be exponential technologies that are really changing the way we understand our world, or whether it's climate change and the kind of uncertainty and anxiety and systemic upheaval that that's creating, or whether it's things like the family unit and the kind of evolving nature of what it means to be a family in this kind of time of uncertainty. And yet, our education system, and this is probably, hopefully, familiar to a lot of people, hasn't changed very much since the Industrial Revolution. And when the Industrial Revolution created these systems, it was servicing a community where most people didn't have free education. And once this system was in place, it was really about a standardization of learning. It was about a cookie-cutter way of creating skills and kind of management skills to actually work in a kind of industrialized system. And yet, contemporary learning actually doesn't look that much different to how it looked during that period, which is really unfortunate. And as we all know, we live in this kind of VUCA world where kids should really be at the center of how we are, fixing the future. Being empowered with the skills, the mindsets, the experiences, potentially the intergenerational knowledge that is required to actually live in the world and be, participating contributors to this uncertain future that we're experiencing. The good news, so it's not all doom and gloom, is that there are incredible examples all over the world that they are still pockets, and they're definitely not standardized, but they are in the world. And just a few things to kind of spark your interest, and I'm happy to talk about these after the panel. 2/3 of UK schools now have oversubscribed forest schools in their current curriculum, so free schools that have forest schools. There's 800,000 students in India and 18,000 teachers who now are following a happiness curriculum that has put mindfulness and meditation at the center of a kind of curriculum across India. There's the London Interdisciplinary School, which is reinventing higher education and university through cross-disciplinary learning. There's the Green School, which some of you may have heard of in Bali, which is a really interesting experiment on kind of earth stewardship, but through a kind of school community model. There's Lumiar from Brazil, that is a project-based learning model that has no teachers, but rather guides and experts that come in to give insights into project-based ways of learning. And then there's the Teton Science Center, which I love in Montana, that specializes in place-based learning. All school happens outside on a place where you're experiencing science and its amazing kind of vibrancy, but while you're in a place. So these things are happening all over the world. And unfortunately, they're not happening necessarily in formal education. So I just wanted to end this kind of scene setting with a model from it's from Ashoka, which is an amazing organization that focuses on change makers and kind of curriculum and learning around that. And Valerie Hannon, who is an author and a systems thinker, created a model with Ashoka, which is really looking at the kind of current system and where paradigm shifts are happening. And as you can see, in the kind of formal area of learning and kind of existing providers, things are improving, but it's very iterative. And in the kind of informal segment, that's where we see supplementary things, code clubs, after-school clubs, things that are kind of supplementing current education systems, but where the new paradigms are happening and where reinvention is happening is actually with new entrants. And I am super excited to have a panel of new entrants that are really bringing some amazing kind of new ways of learning and experiencing education to kids in many, many different ways, from hands-on making to food to 3D printing. So I'm very excited to introduce our first panelist, whose name is Dominic Wilcox. He is an artist, a designer, and a founder of Little Inventors, whose mission is to inspire children to become the creative thinkers of the future. So, thank you.
This invention does not work. How do I click the... Oh, it is working. Okay. Thank you. So just to give a quick summary, to give context. So I am, yes, as Bethany says, an artist, a designer. I find it difficult to define what I do. But here are some of my work, for example. I basically look around at the world and try to think of ideas that would make it more interesting, surprising, thought-provoking, partly for myself, but then I show it to other people in exhibitions. Here we have a single bed, perfect for me, a teacup with a cooling fan because I don't like burning my tongue when the tea's too hot. This is a reverse listening device that swaps sounds coming from this side to listen on this side. This was the world's first art exhibition for dogs. Then we have GPS shoes. You plot on a map where you want to go, press upload to shoes, and the left shoe there points in the direction of your destination, and the right shoe has a little progress bar that grows. And this one is a stained glass driverless sleeper car of the future. That's a little bit about me. And my life, as I've said, has been immersed in finding ideas and how to do creative thinking. I did this little drawing. This is a typical day in our lives. We're very busy, brush our teeth, get the shower, go to work, lots of emails. We don't have much time for thinking outside of the predictable line that we're all on. And really, we want to get our minds to be able to do this, to jump away from the predictable thoughts. And these are where the interesting ideas are. And of course, children have this natural ability to take their minds off the beaten track, off the straight line. So I actually believe that, when people talk about, I'm not very creative, or how can you become more creative? I think actually what it's about is, as we go through our life, through the education system, and then into work and just everyday adulthood, we start to grow these layers that start to hide our natural creativity. So we all have the same creativity we had as children. The difference is we have built over these layers that are hiding our creativity. So to become more creative, we need to release those layers. And in 2015, I decided to do this project, which was, I did 19 workshops with children, and I showed them some of my ideas, and I asked them to draw their own invention ideas. They could be practical solutions to problems or crazy, bonkers, and funny. There are no limits. And received about 600 invention drawings from 450 children. And then I put a call out this is in Sunderland, by the way, in the northeast of England, which is where my accent comes from. And I put a call out to local makers and artists and who would be interested in bringing to life the most interesting ideas that had come out of the children. And so these were some of the makers, like glass makers or ceramicists, and they chose some of the most interesting ideas to them to make real. And so the children that were selected of their ideas, they met with the person who was going to make their idea into reality, a prototype, a model, whatever it was. And so the children explained their idea in more detail, and then the makers worked on their invention. So, for example, this is Oliver, and he said when he does a good thing, but he's on his own, he has no one to do a high five with. So he wanted a high five machine. And then this machine was made real by a local fab lab in Sunderland who scanned in Oliver's hand, and you press a button and this moves forward. He was very, very happy. Children, of course, watch the news, and they take in a lot of information. Here's Charlotte, aged 11, and she did a device that would lift up your home in a war zone and covered in a safety protection blanket on wheels, and it would wheel out your home away from the war zone. And so we contacted an architect model maker, Erin Dixon, who made this beautiful example to bring to life Charlotte, her idea. Here's a funny idea. Wendy said that it's a bit boring scooting around by yourself. She wanted to bring the family, and so we contacted an advanced automotive company who brought this to life. We then had an exhibition of all the ideas. The drawings were put on the wall, and it was about 20 objects made, and it went viral. I put it on the internet, and we had television cameras from CNN and Discovery Channel visiting Sunderland. Many people went to the exhibition who'd never been to an exhibition before, because I think the word art or design is a bit intimidating, while inventing is fun and welcoming and welcomes all different types of people. So that was that, and I started to get emails from people who wanted to do the same thing. And so we started Little Inventors as an ongoing organization in 2016, and we've been going ever since. So now we set challenges on different subjects with different partners or organizations or local governments or museums, and so space or transport or about the ocean. We set the challenges, we create a workshop resource that teachers can download and do a Little Inventors workshop in their classrooms. They then upload the drawing inventions at the end that come out of that, and then we judge them, find makers, the makers make them real, and we have exhibitions. This project went so successful on that first project in Sunderland. I got asked to speak at the UN building in New York. And actually, we've been to Geneva, again to the UN, and on Monday I'm going to the Human Rights Council to show an exhibition of Little Inventors' work on it was called Climate Champions, about inventing for the environment and biodiversity. And these were some of the ideas: a little car that's to encourage more people to cycle, that's weatherproof, a bird's nest hat. Whatever it is, we find them and make them real. It's all about taking children's ideas seriously. This was an idea from a young girl who said her parents talk a lot, so maybe they could store the energy from the jaw movement into... We've got a website. We've got now 20,000 children's invention ideas uploaded, and we have a team who write these positive feedback to build self-confidence, which is really important to being creative. To express yourself, you need confidence to do that, so we try to encourage it. And, clicker stopped. We've started to move around the world, so it's in China. So this is a remote Chinese village doing the same project. This was a toothbrush in a lollipop, and when you finished licking the lolly, you can brush your teeth. We've even made it into the International Space Station with a space challenge. That was beamed down to many children in Canada. So it's gone around the world. We've got books out, which you can actually buy in that little bookshop there. And finally, this was an idea. Children worry a lot about climate, about all sorts of things. And Thomas here came up with the idea for a worry shredder. So you would write down your worry and put it in the worry shredder. It shreds it, and it prints out a positive message and gives you a piece of chocolate. And
thanks for shredding your worry. Please eat a chocolate.
It's a secret one.
thank you.
I love seeing all of your work. I'm so excited to talk about it in a second. So the next speaker is B. Wilson, who some of you may have gone to her workshop yesterday, who is the author of 6 best-selling food books. Another is coming this spring, and is the chair of Taste Ed, a food education charity that now works with over 500 schools in the UK. So please welcome B to the stage.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thanks. Thank you so much, Bethany. Thank you for the introduction. I was about to say I'm Bea Wilson, and I'm the co-founder of Taste Ed, and I don't need to say that anymore. But perhaps I should say what Taste Ed is. The word, which is meant to be a pun on the word tasted, but it's also taste education. And it's based on a system of education they have in Finland and Sweden and other countries called Sapere. And it's a very new experience for me being an activist, or whatever you want to call it, that I'm doing with this charity. I'm an introverted writer by inclination and for the rest of my life, but I wrote a book called First Bite, in which I described Sapere as it's done in Finland, and I researched it and spoke to some people who were doing it there. And I thought, this is amazing. It's so unlike any form of food education I've ever seen in a British school. It was learning about food through play, through the senses. And when that book came out, lots of people said, well, we should have this in the UK. And I said, well, we should, but I have no idea how to do that. But it's been the most rewarding experience of my life, making it happen, writing over 100 learning resources and PowerPoints, and I'm terrible at writing PowerPoints, so it's been amazing when people have sometimes said to us, oh, your learning resources are so great, and we can tell they're written by a teacher. I think, no, they're not. They're written by a food writer that has no idea how to arrange things neatly in a PowerPoint, as you're going to see in this PowerPoint. But anyway, I wanted to say two really big things before I show the slides. What makes for good and effective food education? I think there are really just 2 things, and both of them are completely missing most of the time in the way that food is taught in the UK, and my impression is it's very, very similar in lots of other countries. Point 1 is establishing the fact that food actually matters as a subject in schools, that it matters at all. It sounds like a really obvious thing to say. In the Bella Lack session that opened Fixing the Future yesterday, people were talking about how we need to change the metrics of success. And that is totally true when it comes to food education. At the moment, it's not true either at a political level or among school leaders to say that people accept the fact that food matters. As a society, we tend to treat food as this trivial subject compared to literacy or math, science or history. But this is crazy. As we found at Taste Ed, You can use food to teach pretty much any other subject, and in the process of using food, you will empower every child in the class to feel that they can join in and they have a voice. We have used food to teach literacy. We've created lesson plans on ancient Rome. We did one on food and the Beatles, which was called Ringo's Broccoli, which was all about how Ringo Starr grew up as a fussy eater, but now broccoli and blueberries are his favorite food. And we've done ones on science and evolution. There was a lesson plan called the Don't Eat Me Salad, which was about how plants have these natural defenses, such as the pungency of garlic or the bitterness of certain vegetables, which are telling us not to eat them, but we defy those plants by finding garlic delicious. But actually, the biggest thing that a food education lesson should teach is food. And my second point is, you can't really do food education without food itself, and yet weirdly, that's the way it's mostly been taught, in a theoretical way. The food education which matters most is not theoretical knowledge about carbs or fats, but something deeper, a knowledge of the senses. So a typical taste ed lesson really just consists of bringing fresh fruit or vegetables into the classroom, and the teacher will say, tell me what you see, tell me what you smell, tell me what you feel, tell me what you hear. It's amazing to watch a room of 30 children talking about loud and quiet vegetables and taking something like a lettuce leaf and tearing it next to their ear and saying, this is like the sound of paper, or crunching into a radish and saying it's like a giant's footsteps. I already told this story in the workshop yesterday, so apologies to anyone who was there. But one of the moments that has most stuck with me about why this really matters was I was doing a session while I was piloting all of this a couple of years ago, one summer before the pandemic, and I brought these flat peaches into the classroom, and it was the height of summer, and they were really lovely and fragrant. And this 9-year-old girl said to me, they don't look anything like the peach emoji. I thought, no, they don't look anything like the peach emoji, and it just struck me that you don't really know much about peaches if all you know is the peach emoji. And we have since then met children with such a deep knowledge of football that they could name every team in the Premier League in order, and they don't know that a cherry has a stone in it. And they don't know that carrots grow in the ground. And I think this matters. So I'm going to whiz through this. How do we actually learn to eat? Through our senses. So this is, again, if you were in the workshop yesterday, apologies, but this is one of our favorite ever moments in Taste Ed, and the person I co-founded Taste Ed with, who is an amazing head teacher called Jason O'Rourke in Lincolnshire in the UK, who very much does believe food matters, and he captured this moment on film of a girl having her very, very first taste of plum. And she moved through the full gamut of human emotions. First of all, fear. She says on the film, will it hurt me? It's all slippery. And she just doesn't want to put it in her mouth. But then you can see in the second shot, she's suddenly curious. And the teacher says, go on, it won't hurt you. And then she's still a bit unsure. But the teacher says, you can listen to yourself chewing. And she puts it in her mouth and she listens to herself chewing with her hands over her ears. And then she just does the thumbs up. And it's just the final shot is just joy. So, I mean, this is how we learn to eat. You can't do it without the food and without your own senses. This, conversely, is an example of a lesson plan which is promoted by the British National Health Service, which is designed to teach children about food. I mean, I'll just leave you to make up your own minds as to how useful this is going to be in enabling someone actually to make real food choices in the real world. But it's just giving people a PowerPoint, no actual foods, and this discussion of which of these various processed foods might be healthier. And here are some more. So in the British food education system, there's lots of emphasis on this. What is a balanced diet? What is the Eat Well plate? Can you find a healthier version of these processed foods? Should you go for lower sugar yogurt? To me, this is absolutely crazy and counterproductive and rubbish, really. Whereas taste is different. We learn through experience. I've already described it. Every lesson is direct interaction. How does it smell? How does it sound? Sorry, word missing. You see how my PowerPoints are quite dodgy. So this guy has put on ear defenders. I mean, if you've never done this, you can do it just by putting hands over your ears. If you block out the outside sound, the sound of chewing inside your own mouth is one of the most mind-blowing and exciting things you will ever experience. And we found that many children who've been otherwise reluctant to try things will do it with ear defenders on. There was a boy on the autistic spectrum at a school in Brixton, and his teacher said, don't even bother, he won't join in, he never tries new foods. And then we turned our back, and he put the ear defenders on, and he was just popping tomato after tomato into his mouth, and he'd never tried them before. Sometimes trying things for the first time in a sensory way is aversive. This is a 4-year-old trying lime for the very first time. It's sour, it's strong. One of our rules in every lesson is we say, no one has to like, no one has to try. This boy, conversely, loved the taste of lime. You can just see how happy he is. So these are some of our resources. We have these beautiful illustrations. This shows you how basic some of our lessons are. This one shows you one aimed at higher year groups, which is slightly more elaborate. And the other magic of it is really just, it's teachers and children learning alongside. The pedagogy is, the teacher is not some authority figure, and the children are not these receptive organs waiting to learn. They both learn, and they are both honest about their own tastes, their likes and dislikes. And they say these amazing things. I have 22 seconds left. But this was one of the things I didn't know was going to happen. I got into this because I felt it's so sad and so wrong that a child should grow up not knowing what a carrot is. And I feel, Kathy said she got tearful earlier. I get tearful talking about children and food, so I don't know why I do it so much. But I feel it's deeply unfair that some children have access to fresh fruits and vegetables and some don't. But what I didn't know was they would create these incredible creative sentences out of it. So if you just said to a child, look at the strawberry, what do you see? And they wrote, the strawberry looks like a rocket, and all the seeds are windows, and the leaves are fire. I'm going to end there. We're now in nearly, Bethany said more than 500, it's actually nearly 500. We've had great feedback. I can talk more about that in the questions, and I can talk more about some of the obstacles. So I think the future of food education is coming to our senses. Thank you.
Oh. Hello? Okay. Thank you, Bea. That was amazing. So the next speaker is going to share a very different perspective from Dominic and Bea. Gemma Koch is the innovation manager at TTS, which is part of an organization which is called RM Resources. As well as continuing to teach 1 day a week, she's also developing new products for ICT and computer science ranges, so she's working within the current education system. Gemma is joining us online. Gemma, thanks for joining us.
Hi, can you hear me okay? I'm going to assume that you can. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm so sorry that I cannot be there in person. Unfortunately, the airlines had a different plan for me this weekend. So just to briefly introduce myself again, thank you though, Bethany. My name's Gemma Kosh. I am first and foremost a teacher of computer science, but I am also an innovation manager for TTS, and as that's been explained, that means that I both teach, as I have done for the last 15 years of my career, but I also develop products now for the classroom that are forward-thinking tech products. So Bethany quite kindly contextualized why this is important earlier on in her introduction, but I'll just add a little bit more meat to that. The Industrial Revolution, which was the first main reason that compulsory education was established, really allowed the children of that society to prepare themselves for school. And we've been through 3 iterations of Industrial Revolution since then. So since steam power, we've been through mass production using IT and robotics devices. And we're now on the dawn of what is being hawked as the fourth industrial revolution, which is probably the most vague of all of the revolutions, in so much as we don't really know what that's going to look like in the coming years. But as Bethany explained in her opening speech, education, first and foremost, was designed for providing an education for those children to go and work in the industries that we knew existed. So schools were set up to teach children the necessary skills to go and work in a factory or even work on a farm. Our school holidays still are very much built around the agricultural pattern of the year. Schools were divided into segments of time where everyone took their break at the same time, everyone took their lunch at the same time, everyone finished their day at the same time. And that very much mirrored what was happening in industry. Ultimately, our compulsory education was driving our society forward by preparing our children to be prosperous in their adult life in the industries that existed. And then in the third industrial revolution in the late 80s and early 90s, obviously, computing had reached a point where it was dripping into our workplaces. So we needed to learn skills like word processing, how to use a spreadsheet, the type of education that I imagine the vast majority of the audience will have received. And as such, school changed a little bit, education changed to accommodate that fact. So all of a sudden, classrooms were turned into IT suites, and we had desktop computers in the very early days, very primitive computers with actual floppy disks, like when I was at school. And we adapted so that that generation, my generation, were taught the skills that we needed to be prosperous when we went into our workplaces. And that was great, but now we don't really know what that future looks like. The fourth industrial revolution is a real question mark for our children. In fact, the OECD suggests that 65%, so more than half of the children that are currently in primary education, will go and work in industries that don't yet exist. So our teachers were preparing us for a very known future. Our current teachers are preparing our children for a very unknown future. And that in itself poses a number of challenges. So one of the challenges that we have as educators is how do we prepare ourselves and our children for that future? And one of the things that we do know is that robotics and robotic devices will feature somewhat in that future, as well as the plethora of connected devices and tech that hasn't even been invented yet. But if we have a look at these robotic devices, some of them date back. This guy here, the Roma, is a floor robot that was actually first in classrooms in the late 80s. I remember using one as a child. And into the 90s, he was just this massive programmable robot that moved around on the floor, depending on the directions that the child had programmed to give him. And we also have some of our products like the Bebot and other products that sit in this robotic space. And these robots that are being used in school are great. And they definitely still have a place in education, because fundamentally they're teaching children some skills, computational problem-solving skills that they'll need for the future. But are they really representative of the robotic devices that children will encounter in their adulthood? Probably not. In fact, even if we look at what they're encountering now, we have robots, for example. This robot has been recently employed by the Eurostar, which is the high-speed train that runs between London and Paris, to help children and to help passengers of the train with their departures, with where to grab a coffee, just providing general information. And the way that the children in this picture are interacting with this robot is completely different to the way that they would interact with a robot in the classroom. So whilst that experience is good and it has its place, it's not necessarily preparing children for all the different ways in which they will interact with robotic devices in the future. So moving on, we have robots that will clean our houses that perhaps might need programming. One of the schools in which I teach is in a very socio-economic deprived area in the north of England. And I asked the children, how many of you have a robot Hoover at home? And you'd be surprised at how many children actually already have robotic devices in their house. They may not necessarily recognize said device as a robotic device, but they're here. This isn't a future vision. This is a reality of now. We have robotic devices that are serving in restaurants, and not just in the Far East. We have robots that are serving in restaurants in Belgium, in the Netherlands, in France, in London. This is very much a normal experience. And equally during COVID, robots that will deliver care, physiotherapy, medicine, and healthcare requirements in hospital settings and doctor's surgeries as well. And we also have robots, this one's ever so slightly scary, that will check us into hotels and will provide the same kind of service that perhaps a human being once might have provided, but very arbitrary, very repetitive tasks that perhaps a robotic device can replicate. This hotel, which was actually in Japan, actually has gone into administration now because customers didn't like the lack of human interaction when they were checking in. And I think that's really important as we move forward, because the difference and what needs to change in education, and what's changing slowly but not quickly enough, is that we need to go from a point where children are just learning to program and to control robotic devices, which in the UK, I would say probably 50% of the schools are doing well and the other 50% are still catching up. But we actually need to get to a point where children are learning to work alongside and coexist with robotic devices, because that's what's going to make them prosperous in their future. And in school, we have two parallel themes emerging. We have the theme that I've just discussed, the comfortableness, the ability to sit alongside a robotic device, almost so it becomes as important as your pencil case, your crayons, that we have this tech in the classroom, and that tech permeates through every subject in the school. But then we also have the other strand, the other theme that teachers are probably faced with more challengingly, is that they actually need to be able to recognize the difference between a machine and a human being and what makes us different. Children mustn't learn to consider robotic devices as sentient beings. They need to almost develop their humanness more to be able to thrive in a world where robotic devices are undertaking some human tasks. And going back to your earlier comment, Bethany, about the Montessori approach, that's almost, we need that in spades. We need lots and lots of Montessori approach, lots of play-based learning, so that children become more human and that robots become more robots, and we can coexist together in a society that thrives. So another issue that we have here is that robots are usually in a cupboard and they come out once a week for an hour. And what I would like to see is that actually robotic devices are used in every single subject throughout school. So they're used in maths, they're used in science, they're used in art, and they become such an essential part of the school day that it isn't surprising to children when they go to the restaurant or when they go to hospital that they're also greeted with robotic devices alongside the humans working in those environments as well. So on the screen now, and I'm very aware of time, I do like to talk, is one of our latest developments, Ottibot. And he is just fresh launched to market, and he very much fits the bill of a product, a tech product, a robotic product that has been designed for schools specifically and can transcend across the curricula. He has lots of different applications throughout every subject area. Children love him. They relate to him because he's just a likable character. He has lots of emotions, and he can be used, as can be seen here, in lots of different ways. So for lots of different subjects. He has a tummy that clips out and clips back in again. That means that he can be adapted to different learning styles, different topics being taught, different abilities of the children. And most importantly, and definitely for our audience today, he's one robot that serves many purposes. And I think part of our responsibility as developers of products like this for the classroom is we're very conscious of the fact that having lots of different plastic resources to deliver lots of different learning outcomes ultimately results in lots of e-waste. And what we want to do is we want to streamline that with one device that can be used for many different reasons, whilst preparing children for their futures, but reduce the amount of waste that we're putting back into the world once it reaches the end of its natural life. And that is the end of my slides. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gemma. Okay, and last but not least, and this is a nice segue, is Santiago Fuentemilla and Javier Seva. Santi is the Future Learning Lead of the Fab Lab Barcelona at the Institute of Advanced Architecture of Catalonia, and Javier Seva is the Pedagogical Coordinator of a secondary school, and together they've created an amazing remix, The School, which they are going to tell us all about. Thank you.
Seva, come here. Can you hear us? Yeah. Super. Thanks to invite us. First of all, I have to say that I don't know if I have like contradicting like feelings. I don't know if to love you or hate you because I feel so small right now after see all of your projects. So thanks to invite us to explain our project. Then I'm gonna do a small spoiler. So we will speak in Catalan. So the ones that you don't have the translation, so maybe it's going to be a little bit difficult now, okay? But we will switch. And then I'm going to start
explaining why we're both together here. I represent Fab Lab Barcelona. I will explain the context of the project, and Xavi will explain how they experience this from within.
You did it before. Aquí, perfecte.
Okay, perfect. So I come from Fab Lab Barcelona. I won't explain what Fab Lab is or what we do there. I will talk about lessons learned just to give you a context of why we're here. The picture that you see here, okay, is one of the first images I had when I arrived at Fab Lab Barcelona. It's quite old, that's why it's not of high quality. And at first I found a space that was amazing, with amazing people. They did lots of things. This is one of the slogans in Fab Lab. But I understood gradually what is important there, not the prototypes or the projects, but the combination of the three things we see here: a group of people, very motivated people, to learn and to continue pursuing their dreams, surrounded by huge knowledge and challenges that were set to move forward. Then I discovered that this Fab Lab was not only a Fab Lab, this was inside of a network sharing knowledge. So this made knowledge even greater and bigger. And thanks to a research project in Fab Lab, I saw how we can have an impact in the territory and how important it is to give context to the things that we do and learning Cisco. Cisco is an EU-funded project. We could work for 2-3 years on a pilot project called Thermics in the Neighborhood, and with that we collaborated with all this network that we see here to provide a solution to a challenge. In this case, it was the increase in prices for food. This was an open co-creation project. We didn't know what the target or end was, but we wanted to work together, integrating local knowledge and technology. At the end of the day, we put together a group of people, designers, researchers, artists, people from the neighborhood, and this is what made all this possible, this solution. Here you see a series of objects and materials of showing what we were showing, all the food that was just wasted away, using stones of olives or the skin of oranges or panettone made of different foods. This is our starting point for the Remix the School, which is Remix the Neighborhood. So how these lessons learned, how knowledge is a network, how we can, working together with local realities, schools can benefit from all this. So we had several principles. One was to export our perspective and apply it on the different subject matters, doing cross-sectional projects at school. And we're not only talking about science here or maths, we're talking about art as a vehicle, as a way of combining all these projects to make it sense, and also to use emotions, as we were saying before. Also, we wanted to use the knowledge that we had extracted from the previous experience and all the knowledge of the people who made this possible, bringing to the table projects and innovative proposals and techniques to be able to materialize concepts that are sometimes a bit difficult, such as circularity. How do you materialize circularity? Well, there are some examples here and also down below. It's also important when we talk about the capacity or sustainability of a project, rather. We tried to create a community that could help each other, because that would be one of the key points to have an impact. And here you can see the photo of the 20 teachers who participated in the training and then replicated with the students throughout the academic year. Also, the capacity to create, the capacity to learn by doing, this capacity of understanding how things are done, not only to do, but also when we see a part of something. We were talking about technology before. Sometimes we think a lot about how we do things, but we don't know how they're done, and knowing this allows you to understand what lies behind. This resulted in a series of experiences where over 20 teachers and 100 students worked throughout an entire year, putting all these methodologies in practice with all these resources in the classrooms. And here I have Xavi here, who has lived and experienced this throughout all this time, can explain how this affected school and how you've seen it. Please tell us your experience.
Primer de tot, us voldria explicar una mica el context del meu centre, on treballo.
I would like to explain the concept and where we are. We are in the city of Hospitalet, and we have students in very significant vulnerable situations and at risk of social exclusion. And there's also added difficulties, such as a very high percentage of students with special educational needs. And obviously, within all this context of students, they are quite disruptive too. So at any moment in the class, they can just have a fit and destroy everything around them. So there's another added difficulty, which is the architecture of the school. Sometimes the spaces, well, before we saw the photos of a school from the Industrial Revolution, this has changed nothing or close to nothing. These are spaces that are not the most suitable. So you can imagine how difficult it is to be able to teach or have creative proposals with these people. So we found this project offered by Fab Lab Barcelona, and I talked to some colleagues at work and they signed up, so we did this course. Well, our training, we are not technologists, we haven't studied IT, robotics or anything, I'm a history teacher, so imagine, and so are my colleagues. So for 3-4 months we studied this food collection proposal, and we also wanted to highlight the meaning of community. So when we were doing our own process, we found that there was some rainy season, so within the community someone offered product or a food dehydrator, this machine. And this is the experience with the students. Students were not motivated at all in general, so we told them that we would have a final exhibition, so that's where we started. We presented our product, but we told them that the biomaterials had to be chosen by them. So one of the questions is how could we implement the remix? And looking at the curriculum we had to work on, I took a product that many teachers use, which are basically Gothic glass. But we would do it with biomaterials. So the students were really surprised because we told them that in order to do the stained glass, they had to bring 1.5 liters of biomaterial. So they filled up our fridge in school, and it was all full of varied colors, but it was all biomaterial. So we not only got the educational community involved, other teachers too, because they joined also, but students also had the opportunity of being with the families and doing this with their families because they had to boil that biomaterial to get the liquid. Something that is important here too Okay, let's try again. Un dels impactes d'aquest projecte, this was in the city of Hospitalet, and the interesting thing was that the students themselves, despite the motivation they had, is that they were capable of explaining their projects to journalists. But not only the process of cooking the foods and everything, they had to explain the content of what Gothic art is and how they prepared the stained glass and how they'd done it all. Another added difficulty to this was that apart from work on stained glass, we started working on 3D modeling. Those who have special educational needs managed to do their own 3D modeling. This was a tremendous success, and of course there was also media success, and we did some certificates to award their effort, because we do need their motivation, of course. And their motivation was very little. And also the Council of the US here in Barcelona participated, and the mayors of Hospitalet, and this was so important. I just want to highlight and thank the Fab Lab to give visibility to this type of students who oftentimes are just hidden away, and with the right motivation they can actually reach their goals. Thank you very much.
Super.
Fabulous.
Sorry. Okay, so we're going to have a bit of a panel discussion.
That was really good.
Do you want to go over there? Thanks. So thank you all. That was amazing. And such a, I guess, an inspiring collection of very diverse ways to kind of bring kids into a learning experience, which is one, more fit for purpose, but also really touches on kind of all the ways that kids learn and know. And I guess before we go to questions in the audience, I wanted to kind of ask all of you, you know, the maker movement, you know, learning about food, you know, Fab Labs, these are not new things. They've been around for a long time. So I'd love each of you to kind of share maybe a little bit about what are the blockages that are preventing your work or the specific area that you're focused on from actually reaching more kids, right? I just wanted to kind of reference a quote. William Gibson said, "The future is here. It's just not evenly distributed." And I think this is such a great example of that. Like, why isn't this work reaching more kids? So maybe we'll start with Dominic, and then I'll call upon each of you to kind of share your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I think there are many practical reasons. Obviously, teachers now, particularly with the pandemic, are very limited in time. But also, they have a lot of pressure on their national curriculum to focus on English and mathematics. Again, and this shortens the amount of time available for creative thinking activities such as what we're hearing.
Right.
So a lot of it is that practical limit that the teachers have. Also, like we've actually started to take the workshops to where the children are.
Right.
So finding a local festival and finding a tent or a cabin and setting up a little workshop in there. So going to the children rather than creating a space and hoping the children come to us. So it's sort of flipping it over. So yeah, there are many challenges, but there are creative solutions to reaching those children of all wealth. I think a lot of children that come from wealthy households find it easier to access this sort of activity. The question is, how can we access the children who haven't got those parents that bring them along to it.
Yeah.
You know, we need to go to them.
And have you found that some of the digital tools that you've created have been useful for that too, like the platform, et cetera, to do it at home or in communities?
Yeah, I mean, we really focus obviously on the drawings. So as a creative person thinking of ideas, I'm in my sketchbooks thinking and looking. And so really the focus of Little Inventors is on imagination, creativity, and communicating your idea. So, but the technology of the website where we give feedback, written positive feedback to children is very useful to reach children in Santiago or, you know, wherever, Rio de Janeiro, from the internet where they've uploaded their idea. We write down a human message and they are amazed to receive this positive feedback because confidence, I think, is at the heart of all of these challenges. Like, you know, Barcelona, we're talking about how to engage children or young people that are a bit bored, and how do you have to, I think a lot of it is self-confidence. They don't want to look enthusiastic.
They want to feel it.
And they want to like hide from it. So how do we engage and build the confidence of young people to come out of themselves, to be creative and engage?
Yeah, beautiful. Gemma, maybe we go to you and just talk about that from the perspective of, you know, you are a teacher working within the system, within the constraints or the structures of curriculum. And still, even being on that side, you know, not every classroom has ICT or computer science or access to these tools. What are you seeing from your side of the coin that's, I guess, helping the system itself to kind of welcome new tools, new methodologies?
I'll start with your first question, actually, Bethany, around the barriers, because I think that kind of leads into the solution. The barriers, definitely from a computer science or a tech perspective, are two very clear things. One is money, the budgets. There's a lack of freedom for teachers to spend on tech, other than what I would consider sort of the bread and butter tech, your laptops, your tablets, your projector screens and things like that. Something that would be considered as a nice to have, like a robotic device, definitely doesn't feature high, and exactly what Dominic's just said, because maths and science, so literacy and numeracy resources will always get the first part of the budget before anything else. And then I think the second issue really is training. Teachers in the UK particularly, and certainly teachers that I speak to around the world, they don't feel confident with technology. They don't feel confident with the technology they already have, never mind something that they perceive as being so unique and future thinking, like a robot. They're quite scared to have a go at using that and how they might implement it in the classroom. So I think that there are definitely massive barriers in the UK as well. As a primary school teacher, to train as a primary school teacher, you only have 1 day of computer science lecturing and teaching out of your whole year of training. So 1 day is dedicated to teaching you how to be a computer science teacher. And that definitely is not a computer scientist make. So in terms of the solution, our little a piece of the world that we can control, that we're trying to provide a solution for, is to create affordable robotic devices that actually schools can use across the whole of the curriculum offering, so that a school can make a purchasing decision based on something that's going to last a long time, can be used in maths and English, which obviously ticks those golden boxes, particularly post-COVID as we look to recovery in those areas. And it actually stands up as value for money, rather than just something that's being bought for computing lessons. Actually a piece of tech that transcends the whole school day and the whole school ethos, really.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea that a tool could create cross-disciplinary ways of working without the curriculum even shifting. It's quite, let's see if that works. So B, what about the work you're doing? So your work obviously is very specific in terms of food. What barriers do you see, if any, to other schools or a kind of wider reach in terms of this type of learning?
I see huge barriers. I mean, this is really all I've been doing with the rest of the TasteEd team for the past 2 years, is figuring out how we remove as many obstacles as possible. And it struck me at a very early stage. I mean, I knew this was a beautiful idea. Jason O'Rourke, the head teacher I do it with, knew it was a beautiful idea that came from Finland, but beautiful ideas from Finland are not what British classroom teachers want. They have busy, overstretched lives, as Dominic has said, and they are judged by results in maths and English. Yeah. And so what we realized at a very early stages was that to make this beautiful utopia become a reality for as many children as possible, and we have an ambition to reach every school in UK, which is 20,000 primaries. We're currently in nearly 500, so you see how far we have to go. We had to reach the teachers, and we had to reach out to where they are now. So one thing we did was create all of these lesson plans, which I've described, and make them completely open access, and make them so user-friendly and walk through. I mean, it's like writing a recipe, that a supply teacher could walk into the class and deliver it. So that was one thing. The open access thing was crucial because, as Gemma has said, school budgets are so stretched that even demanding a tiny bit of money for the resources was too much. But the third thing, which is sort of, I don't know, maybe the whole theme of this conference gets to this. If you're trying to do a paradigm shift, how do you do that? Because the people you're speaking to are here. You want them to get here, but they're already here. So we realized, although Taste Ed is a very, very different model of food education from the way it's been traditionally taught, we had to reach out to where teachers are now. So we had to say to them, well, you might not think you need this bright, shiny, wonderful idea that's going to transform children's taste preferences and make them love cabbage and strawberries, but it's going to tick these other boxes. Right. It's going to tick the boxes of food in the curriculum in the UK, currently falls mostly under design and technology. I think is a little bit crazy, because food is this great, deep expression of humanity and culture, and it's survival, and it's pleasure, and it's all these other things. But, okay, teachers are teaching it as design and technology. I looked very, very closely at what that curriculum was and made sure that every one of our lesson plans would tick those boxes, but we also made sure it would tick literacy boxes and other things. Sorry, I've spoken too much.
No, that is a theme, is, we're in a current paradigm, a current system, a current story, and a lot of people, sorry, go ahead.
So I was just going to say also what Gemma said about confidence. There's a kind of beautiful before and after that happens. Our project manager, Fran, has been gathering lots of data from teachers and asking them, what are the obstacles? And if we question them before they delivered a Taste Ed lesson, how confident are you? And another obstacle was teacher training. So we created a video. There's a half-an-hour video, so people can just access that rather than us sending a trainer in person. They weren't that confident to deliver it because it's new and they didn't know it. As soon as they've delivered it once, their confidence level goes up.
So it's not just confidence in kids, it's confidence in
teachers. It's the confidence of the teachers. And we've got a whole generation of teachers who feel they can't cook. And so we say to them, it doesn't matter. You don't have to cook. All you have to do is experience the food.
This isn't a cooking class. This is a food.
You don't have to do it in a kitchen. But there's a kind of seeing is believing quality.
And I think you're right in the kind of and this was a theme in many sessions I've been on as well, around we're in this current paradigm with these current structures, with these current systems, and you can step out of them, but also to reach more, you can also play with them. You can use them, hack them, leverage them to kind of help create that change and meet others where they're at.
You have to work with it because we realize we don't want this to be just some add-on at the end of the school day. It has to be embedded within a normal, overstretched British school where maybe the head teacher doesn't currently care about food that much because they haven't yet seen the light.
And Javier and Santi, the kind of Fab Lab movement has been around for a long time, and it's, kind of always skirted the edges of school. What's your experience? You have quite a lot of students and teachers part of your model. Is there an ambition to reach more? And if so, what are your barriers?
Yeah, I think so. We follow like the same strategy that you are following. Of course, we kind of like, at the beginning we was focused more in the kids, let's say, going directly to them and then doing activity with them or projects, whatever like that. And then we basically, in terms of like scaling up the impact, so we also like start working with teachers, training the teachers, giving them the right resources, or at least as much we can. Because at the end, so this is something that we also discovered. So at some point, we pretend to be a teacher. So we imagine that we know what the teachers need, but then we discover no. So they are the only ones that they know their own reality, they know the kids. So nowadays we try to, when we design the programs or whatever, so any learning experiences, we try to have this sensibility, let's say, in there, to basically be open enough for them to basically land it in their curriculums or respective, let's say, students, whatever. We think that in that way, they feel more comfortable applying whatever we are proposing. Also, another one is understanding that for any significant change in the school, in the paradigm, it should be like a community change. So we try to talk also with direction in the school. So we try to involve families. So we try to make them think that at the end, everything is connected, you know. So we have to work in that direction. This doesn't mean that this is going to happen like that, or it's easy like that, or the steps are like that. So we don't know that. So there's one slide that I didn't put there, but it's like people ask like, what's the solution? So we don't have a solution. Maybe we don't know it, but we have some principles that we follow that are more or less the ones that I was telling to you.
School and learning in itself is a complex system. Exactly. It involves multiple players, teachers, parents, infrastructure, and so including all of those systems is important.
Yeah, and then regarding technology, that is something that is super attached to the Fab Labs, no? Infrastructure, things like that. I think so. We are trying to be as much open we can. Also, again, with the tools that are being used. Also, for example, pandemic helps us to identify a lot of makers, people that have some inventory, let's say, in their communities that can help. That before it was so difficult to imagine. So we encourage, let's say, the schools to find in the territory, let's say, who can help them in that process. Because it's true that maybe getting that skills fast enough to be, let's say, comfortable, or to put it in, maybe it's too complex, or it requires so much time. So helping or be helped for that expertise, it's smooth, let's say, everything.
Yeah, thank you. Santi, do you have anything to add? Or, I mean, from a teacher's perspective, you've obviously engaged in this. Is there anything you think could be done to make it more accessible to more teachers?
Bueno, yo creo que
I think that what could be more accessible and what we could work on is from principal services and management services will trust those teachers who really want to change mindset and perspective, and also try to change the different teaching cultures themselves. I studied physics and chemistry. I am now a language teacher, and all these synergies that can be generated between these different subject masses, science and physics and chemistry, many interesting things can arise from here. And we've said this many times, this is all included in the curriculum, and we can adapt to that. It's not something that is siloed, but rather it could be cross-sectional. So the thing here is to find time, obviously, and change this perspective and mindset of how to live education.
Cross-disciplinary, I think it's I don't know a single kind of person in the education space that isn't convinced that that is a huge change that needs to happen immediately.
It's also very pragmatic. Because, I mean, what I found when I've said to teachers, here is a lesson plan, and you can simultaneously teach the Great Fire of London and food. They're like, oh, great. It's like a time turner device in Harry Potter. It's like two things in one. Finally, a bit more time.
I mean, we could clearly talk about this for a very long time. We only have a few more minutes left, so I think I'm going to open it up to the audience. If there's any questions for anyone on the panel or for the whole panel, I think this is the time to ask some questions. Otherwise, I can ask some more questions. Does anyone have anything they would like to ask? Yes, there's a few in the front, and there's, I think, one in the back over there.
Super success.
Hi. Yeah, very interesting panel. Thank you. I wrote down my question so that I could get it out. But I was just thinking, I really love the new wave of education. I'm very aware of forest schools and parents that have loved it. I know a school, for example, that actually taught fast fashion in primary school and actually incorporated it in English, history, geography. But my only question really was, how do you see it affecting the grade system? So I find that a lot of people, the curriculum obviously is based on like grades, so ABC or 1, 2, 3 or whatever it is these days. I was just wondering, do you see these as add-ons to the curriculum, or do you see these living in the curriculum? And do you think that there's a way that people will be graded? So is it that we will have more academic or discovery schools or different types of schools that maybe grade differently depending on your learning style? So I was just interested in seeing how you see this working with the grade system, because obviously that is pushing quite a lot of education at the moment.
Yeah, so the question's about assessment. That's the kind of formal term, I guess, that they use in education. But yes, great question. You know, how does assessment incorporate this? Does it? How do we assess some of these things? Does anyone want to take that question on? That's a big question. There are like whole areas of the Department of Education focusing on this right now.
I have thoughts on that. I mean, I think it's such a fantastic question. It gets to the core of it. And I think there's two diametric ways you look at this, and I think both have merits. One is to say that all of this wonderful stuff, doing stained glass, allowing children to be inventors, allowing them to engage with technology in a meaningful way, definitely food. That actually, if you can get children to engage with something that they are passionate about, as a knock-on side effect, their grades are going to go up. There's a guy in Norway who did the equivalent of Tasted, who sadly died a year ago, an inspirational man called Einar Risvik. He said to me, you teach them food, their grades go up. He just said it in this very deadpan way. However, my real heart is in a second answer to that question, which is, as I said in my talk, we need to change the metrics of success. We're living through an epidemic of mental health problems for young people. I spoke to a nursery teacher in the UK who said for the first time, because of the pandemic, she had a cohort of children arriving at nursery non-verbal. They weren't able to speak. They needed so much catch-up that was mental and physical and to do with nurturing. And I would just love us to be not judging humans, actually, in this horrible, limited box-like way, and to see it in a more holistic sense. So that's my real answer. But if you're fixated on grades, all of this stuff is great for grades.
Maybe we do one more question, and then I think we're literally out of time.
There was another one.
Congratulations, Santi and Javi, for your project. It is true that being a teacher or professor in context of vulnerable context was very difficult. So congratulations on one of the challenges any teacher faces or finds is essentially the fact that our children are willing to learn, are motivated to learn, as you're saying, and you have actually managed to do that. So my question is for Xavi, and what is the feedback that you got as teachers, seeing that all this was so successful for students who have very difficult family situations, very complex ones. So what, or has this brought joy to you in any way of the good teacher? What has been the feedback you have received? And then, do you have any videos or any samples of how the students were working at school? Thank you very much. Yes, related to what you're saying, related to the other question of the assessment before, our feedback has been positive from the very beginning because we saw that students were motivated, they actually were willing to do things. It was not only wanting to do things and that's it. They were interested in what they were learning. The topic, of course, was Gothic art. So we thought, well, how can we assess all this, of course? Because the system is the way it's set up with grades. So we also designed some tools, assessment tools, that we are still have included in the curriculum here in the country, which is a more formative way of assessing, having conversations with students, talking about the different things they've liked or they've learned about a project, and you see with their answers that they're learning, you can see that. So this helps you assess at what point of the process they are. And you realize that all students have managed to do their stained glass project, but not all have learned the same. So this is all, of course, part of the learning process. Not everyone can do it, but not at the same moment or at the same level, so to speak. And in a more strict assessment, those students who do not reach the goal when the teacher believes is the moment, well, that means they may have not passed the subject. We do have videos, yes, on YouTube, and I think also Hospitalet Televisio, and students were saying, Xavi, we seem intelligent, we look like smart kids. And when you saw them explaining what they did, that was enough for us. I mean, we didn't need more assessment than that. We didn't have to do a test or exam of any kind. They knew what they were talking about. For us, that was more than enough. It was wonderful.
Beautiful. I mean, we have to stop, but we could clearly talk about this for a long time. Please give the panel a round of applause. Thank you all for the amazing work you're doing. And please ask them more questions after the panel. I'm sure there's more to be discussed.
Thank you.